It's not even New Year's Day yet, but many of us are suffering from hangovers from having lived through a tumultuous 2016. It was a year when, for many, the unimaginable happened. No, a glass ceiling wasn't shattered, but history was still made when the Electoral College secured the presidency for the first time in another way. Donald Trump will be the first president who has no experience in either the government or the military.
Written by a nice reporter. Now the poor guy, you got to see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
And what a road he will have traveled to get to the White House. The king of the non-politically correct comment who tapped into the anger and frustration of working-class voters while he aggressively antagonized the press.
False stories, all made up. Lies, lies. And they take these lies and they put them on front pages. This is a rigged system, folks.
Along the way, there was an endless stream of tweets, a bizarre infatuation with an American adversary who was accused of a cyber assault in the election, a public fight with the Alec Baldwin impersonation on SNL, a reversal of whether President Obama was born here, and a dismissal of climate change as a hoax perpetuated by China. Oh, I forgot, and a parade of women who say he sexually assaulted them. How could he possibly win, said many pundits well into their election night coverage. 2 words, Hillary Clinton. She'll be remembered by many, including some of her own supporters, as, to quote Trevor Noah, the only candidate Donald Trump could have beaten. Unable to really say she was sorry for a private email server until it was too late. Unable to tell people she was just sick until long after she fainted in public. Her list of stumbles went on and on. Let's start our look back at the past year with what happened with this unconventional, and that's an understatement, presidential election. Joining me are Judge Nancy Gertner, former federal judge at the U.S. District Court here in Boston, appointed by President Clinton, I should say. Nice to see you, Judge.
Nice to see you.
Michael Sullivan was asked to serve by President George W. Bush as a U.S. attorney in this district. Nice to see you, too. And former CNN White House correspondent Dan Lothian. Dan, it's good to see you.
Good to be here.
What was the message people sent on November 8th? You're a close friend, we should say, of Hillary Clinton, in addition to being nominated by her husband. What was the message they sent?
I think it's actually incoherent. I think you can't figure out, there are stories about how that both sides had negatives, and so to some degree, when a woman has the same negatives as a man, she invariably loses. I think that there was certainly, ignoring the white working class message. But ultimately, I think we're going to be sorting this out for years to come. It was a close election. Even in the states that she lost, Hillary lost, it was close. And so was it a message? Was it her negatives? Was it the Comey letter? I don't know.
So you're a Trump supporter. What was the message?
I think the message was one of change, outsiders, and I think that's what the American people wanted to see during the course of this election. You essentially had, a candidate that had been tied into decades in terms of, former government work and government officials, and you had somebody who was completely outside the government stream. And the American public said, we want change. We want somebody who's outside of government.
Dan, you covered the White House. If I said to you a hypothetical a year ago, let me conjure up a candidate who talks about grabbing the genitalia of women on a tape, disparages a POW, and ridicules a family whose Muslim son, was killed in Iraq. How would that candidate do in an election?
Would have lost. Wouldn't have made it, past a few days.
So how did that not happen?
I think it points to the fact what Donald Trump has been able to do in business, and I know there are a lot of questions about whether he has really built business or he's been good at marketing it. And I think this election shows that marketing can really work because he was able to push the right buttons that would impact the right people, whether he believes it or not personally, whether this is some philosophical, deep connection that he has with something. He knows what buttons to push to get certain reactions. And, he would go as far as it would take him and sometimes pass that line and then would find out, wow, I still survive. And I think he had to be shocked by some of that. And the more that he got away with it, the further he pushed. And I think that's what it was.
You got a sense that he was sort of floating things.
Exactly.
And then when there was a reaction, he would go, oh, I'll continue with this.
Right. When other people would have just backed down and said, oh, I made a mistake, I apologize, he just continued building on it.
When you said a minute ago, Judge Gertner, that, who knows was a Comey, Hillary Clinton has said it was Comey. It was Putin. Her husband, the former president, said he knows angry white men, and then proceeded to say Donald Trump doesn't know much about anything. I had a landslide. He didn't have. It is time for them, after this year, to retire and let a new generation of Democratic leaders take over, isn't it?
I think that there's no question that there's not a plan B for the two of them. They will, I don't know what they're going to do.
You think Bill Clinton can do that?
Whether he can is another question. I thought your question was should.
Should and
right,
can.
Right. But, but the other thing about the election, I really don't want to draw conclusions necessarily about the election. There was some number of Trump supporters who had voted for Obama. So it was an outsider. That's true. But it was contentless. And the question is, what content is going to be, read into this election?
Should, even if people like the campaigner, as Dan just described a minute ago, should people who were on the fence, because you saw that the percentage of people who approve of his transition is roughly 50%. People said it's great. Well, compared to Obama and Clinton, they were in the 70% at the same time. Should people be comforted by the fact that he's the same person apparently he was as a candidate and he's not transitioning into a different thing? Or should they be discomforted, saying we expected a more presidential kind of thing the closer we get to January 20th?
Well, I'm not sure people were expecting anything different, after the election than what they saw during the course of the election. And I think you pointed out, you talked about frustration and anger, and I think, the general mood of the American public has been, captured around frustration and anger. And Dan said, Donald Trump as a candidate was able to tap into that, and the people are hopeful. They were hopeful 8 years ago. They feel frustrated that kind of their hopefulness has never been fully achieved, and they're looking at Donald Trump in terms of being hopefulness, going forward. It might be a different game plan in terms of where they want to end up, but I think it's still built around hope.
Let's talk about game plan. Well, there's been, some concern about General Flynn and fake news and Jeff Sessions as Attorney General, that sort of thing. Pruitt. Supreme Court's the big one. During New Hampshire, Donald Trump called into our radio show on Boston Public Radio, and we asked him about what are your litmus tests, if any, for a Supreme Court justice. Here's what he had to say.
We want good, strong, conservative people that are extremely smart. I'm pro-life, and I would put in pro-life.
He would put in pro-life. He says that his campaign says expect a replacement nominee for Justice Scalia sometime around Inauguration Day. Are we going to see an ideologue? Because that's essentially what we've seen in the cabinet. Or are we going to see somebody that may be acceptable to moderates?
I don't think we'll see someone who's acceptable to moderates. I think, when you look at how many chances he will have to influence the court, I don't put a lot of weight on this one, though. Nothing will really shift on the court. Where I see shift happening down the road is when you have that next seat.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg in her 80s.
Exactly.
And that's Breyer in late 70s.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or Kennedy.
Kennedy.
That's where I think you can really start seeing, what Donald Trump can do with that court.
What do you see here, Judge Gertner? And if there's a name that's floating out there who you could live with, obviously his politics are not yours, that he might embrace.
I don't think I've ever seen a presidential candidate who had a slate for the Supreme Court. If you recall...
Wasn't that a good thing? He named 21 people, so we got a sense of who we might pick.
Right.
Isn't that what we should get?
But the notion that you have a slate, if I get in these... No, this should have been an open discussion. Where are we now? Who are the people who are qualified? I don't know who I would select from that, but I know that if the litmus test is the reversal of Roe v. Wade, I'm not there. I do want to say one other thing which needs to be said. Mm-hmm. There's an entire possibility here that this guy is nothing but a demagogue. And it has to be said. You can come up with all sorts of interesting conclusions about him, but so much of what he's done is almost contentless. It was whatever the public was ready to hear. And so who knows what this administration will be.
Okay, how about Supreme Court, Nostradamus? Stay on this. What are you expecting?
I think he'll be faithful to the positions he's already staked out. I mean, one thing you have to
including being pro. I mean,
I think he said, listen, I want to pick a conservative judge. That should not come shocking to anybody. He's been very transparent.
Roe v. Wade has been around for 4.5 decades, though. And settled law, not settled law, what is it?
Well, I suppose it's settled law until it becomes unsettled law, right?
Exactly.
At this point in time, it's settled law. But he has, I think, within the 21, he's got a number of people that could easily fit what he believes should be the next Supreme Court justice. Now, Justice Scalia would not be acceptable to moderates. So why should he be worried about finding a candidate that's going to be acceptable to moderates?
I don't think he's worried about anything.